So now that our blockchain data is being recognized and the account is being recognized, it's time to bring in the next logical step here would be to actually bring in our smart contracts, bring in our smart contracts, bring in our decentral bank, right? Bring in our reward tokens, bring in our tether tokens, and bring this all into the state on React so that we can display all this information. Just like we did with the account, now we want to do this with the actual contracts. So how do we do that? That may sound pretty daunting, but actually it's not so bad, and we're going to see how to do it using the patterns which we're already starting to become familiar with. So the first thing we want to do is let's go back to our constructor where we set our state, and we created an object with just one state, right? And that was the account. And the reason why we put it in an object like this was so that we can add more state down the line. So we want to initialize state for all of our contracts, and then we want to initialize state for the balance of these contracts as well, because we're going to want to display the balance and the changing of the balances, right? When we're depositing, when we're withdrawing, and when we're issuing rewards and checking the balance. So how do we bring in the contracts? And you know what? I'll give you a hint. What we want to do is we're going to add something here. I'm going to put a comma here, because it's an object, we're going to have one thing at a time. And for a hint, I'm going to say, well, if I want to bring in the tether contract, what I would do is I would write tether like this, and I want to input something here. And so go ahead and give it a shot. See if you can figure out what tether should be initialized as. And once you figure out tether, try to do the other contracts and then try to create state for the balance of these contracts as well. So pause the video, I'm going to have a sip of coffee, and then when we're back, we'll continue forward. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you had some success. If you had no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. We're going to go through it together. If you figured it out, that's amazing. Great work. But what we need to do essentially is for Tether, the Tether contract, since it's a contract, it's not just going to be an array, right? An array could give you a list of things, of items inside. We want to have more than just that. We want to have information that can go, we want to have more complex information that could go in. It's not going to be a string, and it's not going to be a Boolean either, right? With a true or false. So our contracts are objects, essentially. Remember, they're JSON. Remember, we have our contracts set up as JSON files, and JSON is essentially JavaScript object notation, right? So where's our JSON, by the way, here in our Truffle APIs? We have all our API information here. So this is what we want to be loading in and initializing to our state, so it makes sense to set it up like an object. So tether, we're going to bring in RWD. It's also going to be an object. And we're going to bring in the central bank, of course. That's going to be an object. And then I don't know what that was. Oh, that was supposed to be a comma. Okay, and then for the balances, well, we're going to want the tether balance. And that's going to be what exactly? Well, since they're balances, we're going to want to make them balances. We're going to make them string. So we're going to say like for a number. So we're going to have the tether balance. We're going to have the reward balance. Also string. And then we're going to have the staking balance as well, which we're also going to set to 0. And we're initializing everything as 0. Here we're initializing all the contracts as empty because we're going to bring them in. We initialize the account as a number value, and then we have these as well. And then the final thing that I also want to bring in is loading. Because, when you have a website and you want it to look professional, you don't want to... It's very important to think about how things are visually loading. And if something's taking a long time to load and there's a blank screen, that doesn't look very good. So having a loading message is very important in that sense. Just like in the sense of when we're thinking about mounting things and the consecutive order of what we want to mount and unmount and refresh, etc. in our page, it's also important to think about with loading. All right, are we having a loading as well? So to do that, we're just going to set up loading, and this is going to be what? Well, this is going to be a Boolean, right? We're going to set it up to true. So we're initializing the loading as true. Now you could initialize it as false and do everything in reverse. if you like, but I think setting up as true makes more sense intuitively for me. And okay, so now we've initialized our state for all of these contracts and balances, but we haven't actually written any of it out or brought them in per se. So let's get started in actually bringing in the contracts and hooking them up to the state. Okay, so the first thing that we could do here actually is we could update the state for our account before we do the contracts, because we never actually updated the state for our account. And how could we do this? Well, in our load blockchain data, right under our console.log here, or actually here, let's go above the console.log of the account. What we can actually do is set the state in here to update it in our account. Well, it's as simple as bringing in this.setState, and within here, we can actually just set the state. We can actually set the state. So we could actually say here, account should be account. And now we can actually choose which account. And we want it to be account 1, right? Account 1. We want it to be account 1, right? So let's save this and let's refresh. And we're saving. And we're not receiving anything. Oh, and that's because this array is only spitting out the first account, the account that we wanted specifically, right? So I just got confused. We want just this account. So it's not 1, right? We're not grabbing it from the second Ganesh. We're grabbing it from this array, which is the first one. So this should actually be a 0. So let's save that. And there you go. I don't know if you saw that, but first it initializes the first account, and then boom, it updates the state and then sees what the account address is. And there it is. So we have now officially updated the account into the app, not just on the console. Awesome. So this is working. Setting the state is working. And again, if you were looking at this set state, really confused and you understand what's going on, don't worry, we're going to do this a bunch, and each time it should make a little bit more sense than the last. Okay, so we can remove this console log for now. Save that. And now let's think about, how do we bring in our contracts and initialize the state? And initialize the state for our contracts, Tether, Reward, and our Decentral Bank.